The sharing has constructed a new community center, and tonight's the grand opening, which is as good excuse as any to stage a botched infiltration. There's a whole big ribbon-cutting ceremony going on. Tom is there. Visitor 3 is there. Visitor 3 is always there. So naturally, even if the intent is to get caught, things must be handled with care and discretion. The shouts were coming from the end, where an elderly man stood next to a cotton candy cart surrounded by children. "Son, I just don't think it's safe to give you any more. Where are your parents?" I circled around, trying to see what Jake wanted me to notice, trying to stay up out of the lights. There was Axe, in human morph. Wisps of pink cotton candy streaked his hair, hung from his chin like a ghostly beard, and blew from his fingers as he forced his way to the front of the line. I said, care and discretion. "Help! Help!" Marco sputtered, then added a violent, "Axe!" "Marco?" I cried. "Marco, you in Flymorph?" "Chocolate covered, man. I'm in the chocolate fondue, and they've turned up the heat. Buffet table! Buffet table! I can't get out!" "Fondue?" Axe asked. "A warm pot of chocolate. Liquid. Brown." I couldn't think of how to describe it. From 50 feet up, I scanned the buffet table. Marco was black against dark brown. I could barely see him from this distance. "Marco, what exactly are you doing in the fondue?" Rachel asked. "Exactly? Well, I wanted to see if it would taste good sucked up through a fly mouth. You gonna help me, or do you just want to bust me?" "Really? Really? You guys have been doing this for 2 years now. You'd think there'd be a level of professionalism by this point." I glanced back at Axe to see what had upset Jake. The Andalite was wearing a pink cotton candy beard and had his hand immersed in chocolate fondue. The chocolate was up to his wrist. He pulled his hand out, held it up in front of his face like he just discovered it was made of gold, then began licking his fingers.
"Cookies!
Wow, I haven't brushed that clip off in forever. But yeah, this entire thing is out of place, counter in tone to the rest of the book. This is supposed to be one of the most serious and dangerous missions the Animorphs have undertaken, and here we are taking Year 1 shenanigans up to 11. And if it didn't feel out of place enough already, while Axe is literally becoming Cotton Candy Santa Claus, Jake and Visitor 3 and Human Morph have this really intense stare down for some reason, culminating in a bizarre bit of physical contact when Jake stops Visitor 3 from swatting a fly. Finally, people start getting their heads in the game and start scouting out the area. Tobias and Axe sneak into the community center to find a suspected Yerkpool entrance, but find nothing but this little scene. The door opened, and there, directly in front of us, were 4 Hork-Bajir, seated around a card table, elbow blades hanging casually off the chairs, tails slung back across the floor. Each held a hand of cards tightly in his claws. A single, unshaded light bulb dangled from the ceiling. "Let's try a different door." Axe backed out instantly. The Hork-Bajir hadn't noticed us. Now, you might be thinking, what with me giving all that silly stuff a hard time before, that I would equally dislike this little scene. But I don't, and I'll explain why later. It turns out the supposed Yerkpool entrance isn't in the community center itself, but hidden among the playground equipment out back. It's pretty obviously a trap, but one the Animorphs are going to have to spring. Axe creates a distraction while Rachel, while in Flymorph, sticks to Tobias, and the two of them fly into the entrance to find an army of Hork-Bajir waiting for them, led by a beautiful young woman with an artificial arm. This is Sub-Visor 51, but we'll come to know her as Taylor. Tobias does his little song and dance, giving them a struggle as they try to subdue him. He starts to morph Andalite to make his Andalite bandit status all the more convincing, which is cut short when Taylor's artificial arm releases a type of paralyzing gas that immobilizes Tobias, Rachel, and a good chunk of the Hork-Bajir soldiers. "Surprise!" she laughed to herself, standing tall, unfazed by the gas. "So sorry for you all. Looks like I'm the only one who remembered to take the antidote in advance. Oh, wait, did I forget to tell you all?" Her laughter stopped abruptly. Gather these fools, she ordered, motioning to the remaining Hork-Bajir. Yeah, it doesn't take long to realize that Taylor is a few watermelons short of a farmer's market. Rachel falls off Tobias when the Yeerks move him, meaning she can't relay Tobias' location back to the rest of the team for the rescue. Tobias is on his own. He's put in a large glass box suspended from the ceiling. I think the Yeerks got it off loan from David Blaine. There's a panel with 3 colored circles in the wall that electrocutes Tobias when he touches it. Taylor identifies it as the AMR, and they'll be testing it as soon as Visitor 3 arrives. Now, goofy name aside, one has to question exactly how functional the anti-morphing ray is. It's not really a ray, at least not in terms of a ray gun. From what we see in this book, it's meant to be placed in a space, and when someone morphed enters that space, it forces them to demorph. That's not very helpful as a security measure, since the Yeerks already have biofilters to detect andalites passing into their space. And it doesn't seem to immobilize a demorphing andalite in any meaningful way, which means they're still dangerous. The only practical application of this device is on andalites already captured so that they can be infested. Now, that's still a bad thing for the Animorphs. They don't want to get captured and have the Yeerks discover that they're humans. But it does kind of minimize this device's actual threat to them. You have to wonder if this thing was really worth all the effort and time and pain put into stopping it. They even got captured because of it in the last book. Thank goodness it wasn't operating at the time. I don't blame the Animorphs for that, of course. They were working with minimal information as to what this thing actually was. But it's still kind of sad that this thing is less of a problem than biofilters and hunter robots. Visitor 3 shows up, saying that he and his soldiers were detained because they were chasing down Axe, and that they killed him and destroyed his scoop. Tobias rightfully doubts anything these people are saying. The Yeerks bring in 2 scientists, complete with lab coats, and it's clear they've been having a pretty rough time. Visitor 3's been pushing them pretty hard to get this very specialized device finish. So they test the AMR, which not only doesn't work on Tobias, but is also pretty much harmless, meaning the Yeerks' fears that it could kill people were unfounded. Since Visitor 3 is the kind of leader who kills underlings to remind him that bugs exist, he doesn't take this failure very well and orders the scientists fed to a pit of taxons. And there just so happens to be a trap door leading down to that pit in the floor of this very room, because Visitor 3 watches a lot of James Bond films for inspiration. And yeah, the whole thing is a bit kish. Visitor 3 is already a loud and mad supervillain. We have an underground lair with a hanging torture chamber, scientists in lab coats testing out science fiction gadgetry, a death pit built into the floor for no practical reason, and a sexy cyborg lady. It comes across as a mix between a corny 60s science fiction action film and G.I. Joe, and some might find that distracting at first. But whatever kind of ironic joy you might have gotten out of the setting is all pushed to the wayside because now Taylor is left alone with Tobias to torture him into demorphing and giving up information. One thing you have to remember is that this book was published in 1999. Torture has always been fiercely debated all through history, but it wasn't always a common source of discussion among your average person on the street as it is today. It wasn't always so front and center. This was before the War on Terror and Guantanamo Bay, before 24 and Jack Bauer, before Zero Dark 30 and Carly Rae Jepsen. There wasn't really any major news stories about torture during the entire run of the books, unless you also fold in police brutality into the definition. The most recent major use of torture in popular media at that point, at least as far as I can recall, was in 1992 with the Star Trek The Next Generation two-parter Chain of Command. Torture just wasn't all that visible in the 90s, which makes the intensity of it here really jarring and effective, especially for a young reader back when it was originally published. She walked across the room with placid determination, turned her attention to the control panel. It looked like something I'd seen at a modern art museum. 3 large circles, maybe 6 inches in diameter, that stood out vividly against a silver-gray background. Blue, red, and black. The last one I knew, the AMR. But the other 2? She hesitated before the panel, almost like she was afraid. Then, suddenly, startlingly, she slammed her hand down on the red button. The circle in my cube glowed a deep crimson. I watched it pulsate with color. And without warning, ah! It struck like a knife, staggering, twisting pain that sliced through my bones. A dagger, twisting. Ah! Sharp bursts of pain knocked the wind out of me. I gasped. "Demorph," Taylor said. I was silent. Impossible to respond. To even think of speaking as the pain seared. Stronger, more intense each second. A high-pitched tone began to ring in my ears. Couldn't stand it. Oh, God, the pain! Stopped. Gone. Color drained from the red circle. I had to look strong. Seem unaffected. Tough. Unbreakable. But I could do nothing but lie there. Lie there and breathe. Breathe. Taylor explains that the torture device, which apparently has been in the works for a decade, directly accesses the parts of the brain responsible for emotional and physical sensations, causing great mental anguish without doing any physical harm. That was the lowest setting. It begins again. I screamed and screamed. My wings trembled, uncontrollable. My beak jerked wildly. Talons clutched at nothing. My bowels failed, and I fouled myself. One of the main protagonists of a popular young adult science fiction book series was just tortured to the point of defecating. And that's when you know that all bets are off. This used to be such a much more colorful series where the US government possessed an ant-like toilet and we got to visit dinosaurs and there was some magic talking whales and stuff. But ever since David threw a dead body down an elevator shaft, any attempt the series has made to capture those whimsical elements have either fallen flat or have had those elements translated into this darker, deadlier era. Even the cotton candy antics in this book are seen more as a nuisance to the rest of the story. Tobias just shit himself because of excruciating pain. In a kid's book. Tobias is saved, sorta, by retreating into his more basic hawk instincts. An animal, a predator that by its nature deals with a lot of pain and hardship, and Tobias manages to shut down within his hawk's brain to cope with it. Ellen Giroux does a great job with keeping us in Tobias's headspace while explaining what's going on outside of it. She uses that one-word sentence thing to punctuate the moments. Now, I've seen that kind of thing used so excessively in other works to feel amateurish and annoying. But Giroux is smart in keeping the one-word sentence things to when Tobias is in terrible pain and thus can't focus, the narration keeping in step with Tobias's mental state. In between the moments of torture, Tobias's narration returns to a much more fluid and complex thing. Eventually, Tobias is driven to flashbacks. Flashing back to horrible memories of living with his uncle, an alcoholic loser who projected his own frustrations on Tobias. Also, he listens to a police scanner as recreation, which is an odd but fascinating detail. We flash back to Tobias being bullied in school, to Visitor 3 tricking Tobias with the Arya ruse, to the first few weeks trapped as a hawk, desperate and suicidal. Then to graphic images on animal abuse, probably stories Cassie told him. Then the scene of Visitor 3 killing Elfangor, finally contextualized as the murder of Tobias' father. You think Tobias had a hard life or something? Tobias is able to withstand it. Barely. So Taylor starts a new approach, as not only can the machine produce pain, but also pleasure. Something to draw Tobias out of his hawk state of mind. It's all about contrast, Taylor says, something she knows very much about, as we'll soon learn. Naturally, Tobias's internal thoughts are much more fluent as he drifts off into nostalgic memories of being babysat by an elderly woman named Professor Powers, part-time English lit teacher, part-time superhero. It's a detail like his uncle's police scanner, something that is not fundamental to Tobias's character, but does an amazing job at fleshing out his history.